Hello, everyone. I am just going to give it 30 seconds for everyone to join, and then I will begin. But thank you so much for tuning in on this very cold Saturday morning. If you come into the workshop later, I'm really excited to work with you. So I'll see you at 2 o'clock. And if you are just joining us for the stream, wherever you are, again, thank you for tuning in. I'm really excited to speak to you today about representation in cyberspace. And it's 4 minutes past, so I'm going to kick off. So yeah, thank you so much to Somerset House for having me. I do not have an undecorated house. I'm here streaming live from Somerset House, which is exciting. So yeah, thank you to the house for having me. This is part of a series called Ground in Practice. It's an upskilling series, and I'm working with Mutant Promise to deliver this talk and this afternoon's workshop. So thank you to the house and to Mutant Promise. I'm really excited. And yeah, I'm going to take you through a talk. I'm going to speak about some of the running concepts and themes through my practice because many of them overlap with this idea of representation in cyberspace. I'm then going to share some new work with you because why not? Again, it's going to aid conversation around this idea of representation in cyberspace. And then I'm going to share a game with you. Well, it's not really a game. It's very experimental. And then there'll be some time for questions at the end, I reckon. So we're going to run for an hour until midday GMT. And I'll try to finish at 10 to just in case anybody does have any questions. So you can use the chat, the comments, wherever you are. And yeah, feel free. I'd be happy to answer them. So let me get started. And yeah, again, thank you so much for joining. So my talk is actually on Twine. Why make slides if you can make web pages, I guess, in line with this afternoon's workshop. So if I'm kind of looking to the right, it's because I'm clicking hyperlinks, which is what I do best. So please just excuse that. I've got 2 screens, which is great. So yeah, hello, and thank you for tuning in. I am going to introduce myself. I am a creative computing artist and educator. I've made up that job title myself, but I felt it represented me best because education is really core to what I do. And I will go on to speak very soon about the strong link between my practice and pedagogy. And I'm going to tell you what pedagogy means if you don't know as well. So yeah, creative computing artist because everything that I do, either I use technology, creative computing specifically as a medium, or at least as a concept to respond to. So always working within this realm. And yeah, I felt it was important to have educator in there. So that's kind of what I go by. My main jobs, my day jobs, are both at CSM, both at UAL, sorry. I work across 2 campuses. One is the famous Central St. Martin's, work on their graphic design course as the lead digital tutor. So I get to work with students that are interested in like emerging graphic design using creative computing to aid their design practice. We work on some amazing stuff. And then I also work, ironically, at the Creative Computing Institute, which is based at Camberwell College of Arts on the top floor. We have a lot of fun there, a lot of playing, a lot of making. I have some amazing colleagues as well. So that role is super fun. Half of it involves teaching on the undergraduate course that we have. And then the other half is where this digital outreach bit comes in. So half of my role there is dedicated to running external workshops outside of the uni, predominantly with audiences that are living around our campus, which is obviously in Southwark. So I work with young people or marginalised people, bring in digital skills and facilitating spaces where we can like criticize technology and respond to it in creative ways. So yeah, I've done quite a lot of nice stuff with them recently. I've been working with the Art Assassins from South London Gallery. So you can follow that series on their website. It's coming out soon, which is super exciting. I've been up in Lancaster, doing some kind of more like wider scope stuff, working with a community of female herbalists. There was a creative computing festival at Peckham Levels. That was fun. And I've been working with Spring Hub community at the moment as well, which is like a food bank that like is situated in Southwark. So I was working with the community that accessed that food bank, and we were doing lots of like creative computing stuff. So yeah, I have a great time, basically. I'm very lucky. And as I was saying, there's this really strong link between my practice and my pedagogy. So just in case anybody doesn't know what pedagogy means, it's the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept. So it's basically how you deliver. It's the art of teaching, which might sound boring to some of you that maybe like if you don't work in academia, but I'm a real strong believer in education and a real strong believer that the way that knowledge is shared is really important, and the way that it's received, especially in the field of computing that already has so many barriers. So yeah, my pedagogy is really important to me. So let me explain this link. So you've probably read my bio already. So my personal practice and research explore representation and inclusivity within technology. So I use free and open source tools to create digital experiences that highlight issues surrounding gender identity, race, and power, with a focus on the complexities within simulating culture and identity. So that is what I do, and I will be expanding on this throughout the talk anyway. And as I said, I'll show you some of my work towards the end. But yeah, this idea of representation basically is where the link is between my practice and my pedagogy. So basically, to be quite frank, cyberspace is not a representative space for all bodies. Therefore, I empower people to criticize it and show them how to make their own shit through working in higher education and participating in outreach work. So when I say cyberspace, for me personally, I think that the term is quite like almost oversaturated at the moment. It means a lot of different things, which is great. For me, I mean any sort of internet experience. So anything web-based, anything immersive, games, beyond, even like augmented reality, blah, blah, blah. So any experience that's been aided by technology, when I say cyberspace, that's what I mean. And yeah, in my opinion, it's not a representative space. And then I'm also stating here that mere representation is not enough. For me, it's not about just being visually represented, as important as that is. And for sure, like that could be improved. But visuals is not where it ends. It's beyond that. You know, what is happening in the development area, and have we been included? Like, have marginalised identities been included from there? Is the space made for us, or are we an add-on to the space? Does the shoe fit, basically? So to give an example, let's talk about 3D animation and the figure, the skeleton, right? So for those of you that don't know, when you're working in 3D animation, as soon as you want to animate a model, you have to build a bone structure. It's really cool. Like, if you want anything to move, you need to give it like that bones. It's a skeleton, and then it adds almost like gravity and joints to the 3D model. Which makes a lot of sense. And it's not just for the human body. Even if you were wanting to animate a fireplace, you would give it a bone structure. And there's a default bone structure. Defaults are often the issue, in my opinion, in cyberspace, because the idea of having a default of something implies that one size fits all, which as humans in the real world, we know that that's not true. We're all so different. And to speak about this default bone structure that we have for animating human bodies, in some ways it's great that it's there and it exists, but it's inherently ableist in the way that it is designed. It has a very kind of like able human body, 2 legs, 2 arms, so on and so forth. And also, once bodies get larger, the space between the hip joint and the elbow joint is only so big. Therefore, you can only have bodies up to a certain size before it starts to glitch. If anyone's read Legacy Russell's book, Glitch Feminism, I think that this is a real example of how marginalised people are forced to exist outside of non-glitch areas, because sometimes to exist, we cause glitches. Anyway, I'm digressing a little bit, but this is what I mean about representation not being enough. Some things that exist in cyberspace that are inherent to it working are not built for us. And, you know, the scene is advancing a little bit, but just also the fact that like so many code languages are only available in English. And there are some amazing people doing work now to like translate languages or create their own coding languages. I've come across some stuff that looks amazing, but this is happening now. This is recent work. Code's been around for ages. So yeah, representation is not enough. It's about doing the work before. So yeah, the link between my practice and my pedagogy, now that I've gone off on a complete tangent, is I basically came to a conclusion that in order to make cyberspace a little bit more representative, we need to feel empowered to make our own spaces. So marginalised people, oppressed people, people that wouldn't necessarily find themselves developing and working in this space of creative computing and technology in general, we need to be there making our own things that are representative of us. And I'm kind of hoping that that long-term diversifies the industry a little bit. And I also know that I am not the only person doing this work. Like, I've met people, and there will be loads of people beyond my remit that are passionate about this. So hopefully it works. We'll check back in 5 years and see. But yeah, this link and my passion for education or sharing knowledge, even in the way that I will this afternoon, is about, I guess, like being quite hands-on. I don't really like the word teacher. However, if there are skills that I possess or that someone else possesses that I can translate to an audience that doesn't necessarily have those skills or wouldn't necessarily be invited into the space to develop, then we get new stories, we get new 3D models, we get new experiences, we get new web-based experiences, we get new immersive experiences, and they are all going into this beautiful web that we have, that is the internet. So yeah, it made sense to go around and do workshops, and then inevitably that ended up in more formalized roles in education. But that's why I really hold on to my like digital outreach. As much as I absolutely love working with students and it's really important, like to think that I'm working with the next generation of designers is really amazing. But it's important that I also step outside of institutions and do like outreach work as well. So again, like things like today, or like the workshops that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, are also really important to me. So hopefully that makes sense. That's where the link is. I do make work sometimes when I get time, but I would say like the core practical element of my practice has turned into this, like facilitating these spaces to criticize tech, and yeah, empower people to make, basically. So anyway, where are we? So if you haven't noticed already, this talk is not a traditional presentation. It's a series of hyperlinks. Hyperlinks are one of my favorite things. I'm sure I'm going to go on about them. So this these series of particular web pages are built in Twine. And as I said, for anyone that is joining us for the workshop later, this is yours probably will look nothing like this, but the platform that I built this talk on is very similar to what you'll be doing. So we're in Twine, that's where we are. And why? Why are we in Twine? It's not just because of the workshop later, although that's obviously an overarching reason. But there are 4 reasons why I wanted to use Twine to deliver this talk, and why I appreciate the Twine community in general. So I'm going to kind of go over these 4 points. I'm going to talk a little bit about open source. I'm going to talk about its strong and diverse community. I'm going to talk a little bit about hyperlinks. I told you, one of my favorite things. And then I'm going to talk about this idea of playful communication. So let's start with open source. So for anyone that doesn't know what open source means, just to make sure the talk is as accessible as possible. So again, any kind of digital platform experience, game, website, anything that needs code to run it, you can release it, obviously, as a product, and you can copyright it and you can own it, and that's one thing. Or you can release it open source, which means that, let's just say it's a game. You release it open source, which means that when you release it with all of its source code. So anyone that wants to can see exactly how the thing is running. So obviously we have transparency. And then in addition to that, you also grant users, anybody that wants to, permission to share, edit, redistribute, and basically play with the code. So again, if you were to release a game open source, and I don't know, Jeanette comes along, Jeanette can access that code, edit the code, maybe change the color a bit, do whatever, take it somewhere else, and Jeanette can re-release that. Of course, there's probably going to be some sort of like, hey, by the way, this was the original source of this and I got it from here, but that's about as far as it goes. So Twine is open source and free, which is really important. I'm very passionate about free and open source software. And yeah, in summary, open source software encourages transparency and accessibility in the industry. I'm not saying it doesn't have its flaws. I'm sure we could sit here and pick away at it like everything. But generally speaking, I feel like it's important and I'm passionate about it because it demands that transparency. It allows newbies in the scene to use existing pieces of code to learn. It's really important. I think we need to get rid of this idea that we have to build everything from scratch. It's okay, like, if why reinvent the wheel? Like, it's the only way we're going to advance is if we're using what we already have out there. There's so much. And especially because I work predominantly with creatives that haven't come from a technical background, there's a barrier there. Like, they just want to make their experiences. They never said they wanted to be a computer scientist. So like, using existing things is okay. And I feel like open source allows for that. And yeah, which creates accessibility in the industry. More people can get hands-on, more people can respond to things. And I think it's like a sense of community as well. The open source community is beautiful. And yeah, just to expand a little bit, I'm doing a lot of research in open source at the moment, and doing a lot of kind of tests of how we can apply these methods outside of software actually and start to apply them to real life. So yeah, hopefully more to come on that. We'll see. I've been running some workshops, testing it out on my students. And yeah, I feel like I'm coming to some interesting conclusions. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, that's me on open source. There were 3 other reasons. So this strong and diverse community that Twine has. So Twine has a strong community of otherwise marginalised developers. And then I've got a quote here from Eden Fuller. With so many barriers to entry removed, Twine has empowered creators who might otherwise have never made a game. And I can vouch for that myself. I've led like a few Twine workshops in the past. And I really don't think that there are a lot of people in the room that would have never like identified with the idea of being a game developer, or maybe not had that that entry point into how to use things. You know, you think of developing games, you think of complex software, you think of coding, and if you're not experienced in the area, you probably think, nah. Twine is special because it's very limited code. You can get super codey with it and you can do amazing things, but in order to get a basic experience working, there's very, very minimal code needed. Also, the fact that it's free, web-based, you don't even need to download anything, and open source means that marginalised people that may have never made a game are able to tell their stories on Twine, are able to create their own narratives. And yeah, if you are coming along to the workshop, we'll have a look at some of these existing narratives out there already. I must say there's a really strong queer community on Twine, which is really dear to me. And I've just come across like so many, even just like experimental games that are not even games at this point, which is another thing that I love about the platform. Like right now, I'm leading a talk in it. Of course, we can do interactive fiction, we can write books in Twine, novels, but also, you know, once you start playing around with images and sound, I had a really cool student that made a whole sound experience in Twine. I just think it's, I mean, like with much of the web, the possibilities feel not endless, but you can really expand and push the software beyond its boundaries, which is nice for creatives. I feel like we like to do that. So yeah, this strong community is another reason why I really appreciate the platform. I am now going to talk a little bit about hyperlinks, but I'm actually going to let Ted Nelson do that for me. So obviously it would be a shame not to hyperlink to something here. So I'm going to play a short video for you. It's 4 minutes long. And it's, I really respect this person. Of course, so he's one of the very early internet pioneers. And of course, yeah, identity-wise, yeah, he's cis, he's male, he's white. Like, we could, again, criticise that if we wanted, for sure. However, he's nuts, and I love it. And he's so passionate, and he's so angry about the state of the internet, and he had bigger dreams. And I really respect what he's saying and what he's still saying. And in this video, he speaks about interconnectivity and hyperlinks in a really interesting way. So enjoy. I will play this for you and give my voice a break.
Back to the very early times of speculative concepts of a connected world. In the early 60s, many years before the first Apple personal computer, a young thinker, Ted Nelson, had his own ideas about creating a computer network. The web, as we know it, took a different route, but Nelson's ideas are dormant.
It was an experience of water and interconnection. I was with my grandparents in a rowboat in Chicago, so I must have been 5 years old, and I was trailing my hand in the water. And I thought about how the water was moving around my fingers, opening on one side and closing on the other. And that changing system of relationships, where everything was kind of similar, kind of the same, and yet different, that was so difficult to visualize and express. And just generalizing that to the entire universe, that the world is a system of ever-changing relationships and structures, struck me as a vast truth, which it is. And so interconnection and expressing that interconnection has been the center of all of my thinking. And all my computer work has been about expressing and representing and showing interconnection among writings, especially. And writing is the process of reducing a tapestry of interconnection to a narrow sequence. And this is, in a sense, illicit. This is a wrongful compression of what should spread out. In today's computers, they betrayed that because there's no system for decent cut and paste, and they changed the meaning of the words cut and paste and pretended it was the same thing. So a guy named Larry Tesler, whom I consider to be a good friend, nevertheless changed those words, and I consider that to be a crime against humanity, and he doesn't understand why, because humanity has no decent writing tools. In any case, this is the problem of interconnection and representation and sequentialization, all similar to the issue of water. So here we have a parallel presentation that shows a quotation connected to its original context. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And where is that from? That is from the King James Bible. So we can step down to the next quotation. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight, and that is from the alphabet of Ben Sira. And so as we pull back, we can see successive pages coming up to connect with their sources or with their linked contents.
His vision of links never materialized. By some, he was labeled insane for clinging on.
There are two contradictory slogans. One is that continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result is a definition of insanity. On the other hand, you say, if at first you don't succeed, try again. I prefer the latter, because I don't want to be remembered as the guy who didn't.
No, to us, you appear to be the only one around who is clinically sane.
No one has ever said that before. Usually I hear the opposite.
Thank you very much for talking with us.
Okie dokies. So yeah, it's like, it's funny, you know, it's, as I said, I really respect what he's saying. But also it's hilarious, you know, like, you know, some would see that as radical, but I often think that like radical ideas are the best ideas. And he's right. Like, why did we not trace it like that? We have so many issues with like fake news and data and like the source of information, and we're so dependent on this space, and we haven't embedded any sense of like tracing or just like, you know, meaningful connection. So yeah, I really like how he speaks about like hyperlinks and even I guess like copy on the web. So yeah, that, as I said, I will let him summarize that for you. And then I have one more point, which is this point of playful communication. So just to recap, I'm still banging on about Twine and why I like it so much. So the last point now is this idea of, so Twine assists creators in telling their stories in a playful and interactive format. So I've already kind of touched on that. As I said, about the endless stories that I've heard being told just from just me running these Twine workshops, diverse stories, interesting stories, stories that would struggle, unfortunately, because of oppression to make it into the mainstream games industry. But the fact that they're still being told on a platform somewhere is definitely better than nothing. You know, we're bored of the damsel in distress. We're bored of like cis male protagonists. We're bored of war games. Well, I am anyway. And I think like new stories need to be told. So yeah, I think Twine assists creators in doing that by being so accessible, by being free. And I also think that like communication through play is also really important. I think that games are a really kind of important cultural movement in modern society because they allow us to interact with narratives in an immersive way. So I think that we can also have like difficult conversations or share difficult stories through games that facilitate and give people the tools to speak about and understand these things. So not even just Twine games, but I'm talking about games in general now. I really feel like they can do that. And the fact that Twine encourages narrative and story and allows people to do that is kind of like almost the first access point into like moving into that space. So yeah, that's the last reason why I love Twine. Okay, we're almost there. As I said, I would like to spend probably the rest of the time now. As I said, I will try finish at around 10 to just in case we do get any questions in. And if not, then I'm sure I can just ramble on or something. But yeah, feel free. So I'm going to spend the rest of the time to share some new work with you. And these pieces are a response to my two kind of current research topics, the things that I'm looking at most at the moment, which are super broad, basically, because I'm a Gemini. I don't like putting myself into a box. I'm indecisive, so they're really broad anyway. But yeah, so one is this idea of open source as a design methodology. So as I said, looking at the approach of open source, this idea of transparency, moving away from a final finished product that is owned by a person and moving towards collective experiences that are owned by an infinite amount of users, really. And then representation of identity in cyberspace. I've got a particular focus on immersive environments. But yeah, as you know, that's what the talk is all about. So I'm going to share two. I'm still struggling with what to call them. If anyone has any ideas, go for it. But I've been writing recently. I've changed medium a little bit. So I've been writing these essays, poems, I'm not sure, these things in README files and uploading them to GitHub. If anybody doesn't know what GitHub is, it's just like it's a hosting place. I mean, it's a lot more than that, but it's where you can host code in short. So yeah, and again, it's free. And yeah, I've been kind of just popping them on there. So I would love to share them with you. I'll read them out because why not? And then I've got a Twine thing to share with you after that. So let's have a look at this. So this is GitHub. This is what it looks like. And this is what a README file looks like. So it's actually really conceptually relevant that I'm working in these README files. As I said, another thing that I love about like working in creative computing and with technology is that like, I think it's most interesting when softwares or tools or platforms are pushed beyond their boundaries into unintentional spaces. So README files in industry accompany like software or experiences, and they're not part of the code, but they're uploaded with the code, and they're called README because the idea is that you read them. So in industry, again, let's say I release a game, and I'm popping all its code on GitHub because that's where I'm going to host it, and then I'd put a README file, and it'd just tell you a little bit about me, maybe a little bit about the game, maybe when it's due to be updated, maybe a few like teasers for if there's going to be a number 2. It's like a manual almost, like an introduction to the thing, whatever the thing may be. But I, again, have kind of like reappropriated README files, and I'm seeing them as a really interesting way to write and communicate with people. So yeah, I've been writing these things. So this is called In Between Binary. I've also it's in a zine at the moment as well. So shout out to Mutant Press. It's in their first issue. So this obviously exists in other formats as well. It could be a PDF. It can be printed. It's just letters, numbers, and symbols. But I quite like the idea that they're also existing in cyberspace, in GitHub, in a README file. So here we go. So In Between Binary, at the moment, I'm calling it an experimental essay written by me in the format of a README. Historically, Black and or queer folk and other marginalised identities have been undocumented and erased by colonial lenses. Now, the binary structures that are facilitating our existence continue to censor, surveil, and delete. We are presented with interfaces that feed addiction but do not water expression. We are encouraged to use and discouraged to question. We are trapped in languages that we cannot speak, and when we learn to speak them, they advance. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. My HTML stands for Hope, transcendence, moon, and love. My python does not bite. My C# is blunt. We are forced to exist between the binary, therefore we must learn to thrive here. The binary body confuses and disorients, pitting our interests against one another across modalities of otherness. That's Legacy Russell, glitch feminism again. I am not sure if we can decolonize a web that was built on our suffering and capitalizes on our pain. The very fibers of our so-called hardware are stolen. They call it modern slavery, but what makes slavery modern? When we look at the history of digital devices, it is quite clear that the burden of digital media's device production is borne disproportionately by the women of colour who make them. That's from a really interesting essay by Lisa Nakamura on like Indigenous hardware, basically. The system is broken, and so I ask, what does software feel like? What if binary was bent? And what if the web was a home and not a sticky trap? I recently did a workshop with a community of female herbalists. One woman touched me when she quoted the ancient Egyptians and said, a society that advances technically without advancing spiritually is destined for failure. And her name is Riaz. Riaz is an elder, a possessor of healing herbalist knowledge. Where is the space for her spirit in their code? We are forced to exist between the binary. Therefore, we must learn to thrive here. On thriving. Redistribution. We must work to redistribute knowledge, power, and resources. Foster a world in which skills are shared, not bought. Translate and create code and information in the native languages spoken by Black and Brown people. Use open source as a methodology for community building. Encourage annotation, because annotation promotes education and liability. Speculation. We must empower people to speculate, imagine and play. Support Afrofuturism, construct pockets of utopia, nurture glitches and the art of tinkering. And finally, degrowth. We must pause, repurpose and recycle what we have, use existing data to positively respond to people's behaviour, stop to think, question and critique. We are forced to exist between the binary, therefore we must learn to thrive here. So that is In Between Binary, and you can see there's some cute little ASCII arts to accompany it. And then I've got another similar thing, which is, oh, thank you, Somerset House, for popping the link in the chat. So this one is, I think this one is definitely maybe a poem, but we'll see. So this one is called My Thumb Caresses L2 as I alter myself time after time. So this one is particularly about the experience of recreating oneself in an avatar creator in a game. New game, loading. Ambient music and text-based narrative set the tone. Loading. An avatar, slightly bouncing, appears on the screen. Whose avatar? A presumption is made. A male presenting figure stares back at me, bouncing. The instant drive to recreate my body swarms me. Tab after tab of alterations and editing options surround him. My thumbs dance around the controller, considering and selecting. I begin the godly process. The Adam and Eve-like shift from male to female is simulated, and a female presenting protagonist is born. I stare back at the third version of myself. There's a strong disassociation between me and my virtual represent. I am defined by a character assumed by someone other to me. Currently a slim, brown-haired, white, female-presenting avatar. I admire her appearance whilst I take the journey through the interface of modifications, from blush to olive, through to caramel, sweet, dark honey to sweet, dark chocolate. The bitter struggle of resisting the categories begins. Becoming embodied in countless renditions until I find my sweet spot. Virtually simulating my flesh, my melanin becomes a series of binary numbers, a grouping of tiny brown pixels. The quest through the endless menus continue. Versions upon versions are created. I watch my virtual body shift from slim to fat, and I wonder about an existence beyond the boundaries. I settle for the slim build with tits the size of watermelons. My hair is a collection of ringlets, some moisturized to perfection and some left to create a halo of frizz that surround my head. The median length beach hair will have to do this time. Each delicate strand of my tangled mane becomes a block of poorly rendered mush. Eye shape, eye height, eyeliner, eyelash, eye colour, cheek inflation, cheek height, cheekbone width, cheekbone sharpness, cheek colouring, forehead wrinkle, forehead height, jaw width, jaw angle, chin forward, chin depth, chin circumference. My thumb caresses L2 as I alter myself time after time. Nose height, nose scale, bridge width, bridge length, nostril spacing. A series of scroll bars and selections slowly allow me to regenerate. Like a flower from a bud, I blossom, and Princess Jazmin is born. So yeah, thank you for listening to those. It's 1:15 and I've got one more little thing to share with you. And then yeah, I reckon I will finish at 10 to, so we'll see if we have any questions. So yeah, now just because I like to make things extra meta, I'm going to link from this twine game into another twine game. It's not a game, it's a twine work. But yeah, here it is. So I've hosted it on Itch, which is a game hosting area. I think also some other stuff as well, but a lot of kind of underground indie people exist on Itch. So if you want to find interesting, not commercial things, then yeah, find yourself on Itch. I would highly recommend it. So I've got like a, one second. Sorry. There's a little bit of a description here about what it is. So it's called 50 Shades of Brown. 50 Shades of Brown is an exploration of digital skin tone. So the buttons in the interaction are each a hex code for a different simulation of brown skin. The interaction prompts the user to press these buttons, simulating the act of prodding and gazing, referencing the trauma that black and brown bodies and hair receive. The categorization of colour and reference to the erotic drama 50 Shades of Grey explores the problematic fetishization and categorization of people of colour and the challenges that come along with simulating identity. Please take this invitation to navigate through digital melanin. And yeah, if we can, also pop the link to this in the chat like you have been so kindly doing. No worries if not, you can like Google it. It's also on my link tree that's on my Instagram. You don't have to, but it's quite nice to click it yourself, because as I said, this clicking that you're constantly having to do is simulating the idea of like observing and fetishizing like black and brown people. So yeah, if you want to like play along at home, feel free. And yeah, it's a very simple experience. There are just 50 shades of brown, and it was a comment on the lack of visual representation. So often, especially in less expansive avatar creators, the skin tones are quite limited, and it's really important to black and brown people to be represented properly, because like, you know, things exist and we have like different skin tones, and I think for me anyway, even the undertones of our skin is really important. And like, unfortunately, because we live in the society that we live in, like being brown is a political thing. So it's not as simple as just like regenerating it, or, you know, like it's political inherently. It just is. So there are 50 shades of brown that you can like click through here, and it was just a frustrated response to, you know, these hex codes exist, these colors exist, so why are they not built into these complex avatar creators that exist. So yeah, I guess that's what it was. I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten now. Something about the games industry. Can't remember. Maybe it'll come back to me at the end. But I'm going to flick through this. I'll just click through them all because why not? There are loads of gorgeous shades of brown here. And as I said, you click in the hex code because I wanted the piece to have that, I guess, like element of code in it. So often like hex codes are used when you're wanting to like implement color into like a software. There we go. So that's all of them. And thank you, Somerset House, for popping that in the chat. And yeah, this is another kind of thing that I mean about Twine being a really experimental space. So there's no logic to that game. I guess, I mean, I studied fine art, if you can't tell. I studied fine art, so I am like quite conceptual when I make things. And I think that's why, again, like not to sound like a broken record, but that's why I enjoy pushing like platforms, softwares, tools to their kind of boundaries, because I don't know, I think it's like conceptually interesting. So yeah, studied fine art, and just to be transparent, I then went straight into like freelancing, workshop running, and then went straight into academia. So I haven't done some sort of like computer science degree. I'm no expert. I'm just a maker and a thinker. So hopefully that, again, like makes things feel a bit more accessible. So I'm kind of done. I usually talk for too long, but I didn't this time. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the talk, and I really appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with me. I'm looking out the window now and it looks tragic out there, and I'm in London. So I'm sending my love out to anyone that's in the other areas that have been more affected by this storm, because it's not looking very nice at all. So stay safe as always. If you come into the workshop later, I am absolutely gagged to meet you. I can't wait to work with you. And another thank you to Somerset House and Mutant Promise. And I think that's all from me. If you want to keep up with my work, the best way is following me on Instagram. And I'm sorry for anyone that doesn't have it, but we live in a hyper-connected world, and I live in a very fast mega city, and I haven't had the time to like make anything else active. So yeah, Princess Jazmin _art if you want to like keep up with what I'm doing. And yeah, reach out to me. I'm super reachable. So yeah, thank you so much. And if I'll see you later, I will see you later.